might a kobold taste? Maybe like a gator, salty, gamey. Muddy as the chores they perform, like a cheap beer. Or maybe, just maybe, they taste like rebellion. Welcome to the Forgotten Realms, the home of Baldur's Gate 3. Today we're going to do something a little unique compared to our other video essays. We'll still be doing our usual combination of source materials and gameplay to discuss a topic, but this time it'll be a theory, if you will. One backed up by sources but never fully stated outright in the game. We're going to discover why Astarion is so obsessed with kobolds. For reference, in this essay we use a variety of sources. These include, but are not limited to, official materials, official fictional materials, online resources, D&D communities, and experience around the table. Currently, the Forgotten Realms is in 5e. However, if 5e lacks something in specific lore on a specific topic, we'll be pulling from older editions. This is because a good DM knows when to supplement missing story elements with older lore to create a complete experience. I'm not always quoting something, but at times when I am, you'll see that specific source in the bottom lower left corner while I'm quoting it. Otherwise, I'm just paraphrasing together combinations of information from all of my sources, just like you would write in an academic essay. I'm an author, so training to be a DM who can craft custom campaigns is an important long-term goal for me. And researching for these essays helps not only build my knowledge pool, but as well it lets me express a passion that I have for Tyrell. So if you want more content like this, drop me some food emojis in the comments below, or hit that like button. Both are great ways to let me know what you enjoy. And don't forget to subscribe for more weekly essays based on the lore of fantasy universes. And with that, grab your cozy drink and let's discover together, why is Astarion so obsessed with kobolds? So, what is a kobold? The first time I saw a kobold, it wasn't in the Forgotten Realms. It was in Final Fantasy XIV. And Eorzea, they're so freaking cute. Like elf-eared squirrel cats. However, that's not at all what they look like in the Forgotten Realms. So the first time I saw one in D&D, I was a little shook. Kobolds are small reptilian humanoids, which, yeah, I know, they get to be a humanoid, but goblins are goblinoids. Heavy eye roll. They're 2 to 2.5 feet tall with scaled skin. They have clawed fingers, their jaws are like a crocodile, and their tails are rat-like. According to the 2E Monster Manual, one subrace can speak the Draconic language, but with an accent. So, like the Dragonborn in Baldur's Gate 3, they're humanoids, but they have some link to worms in their bloodline. However, the way that kobolds blend into society throughout the plains of the Forgotten Realms does vary depending on the location. So, for this instance, because Astarion was born and raised at the Gate, we'll be focusing on their place within the city. In real-life German folklore, kobolds, or kobolds, are household spirits. Depending on the folktale, kobolds may perform household tasks, like chores or minor garden work. However, they're prankish, like a poltergeist who's not trying to kill you. As long as they're not mistreated, they're lovable little imps. However, when they're mistreated or they feel threatened, they resort to retaliation, retribution, or become extremely cruel. And within the walls of Baldur's Gate, their role in society isn't too different from their real-life counterpart. We do get a glimpse at this role within the city in a banter exchange that happens between Karlach and Minthara in the sewers.
This place is foul. Drow would not tolerate rivers of waste flowing so close to their residences.
You've got slaves to manage your sanitation. Baldur's Gate doesn't, though we do rely quite heavily on kobolds.
But surely the kobolds are slaves.
Hell no.
Strahd. Yet one more reason to despair for the fate of this city.
As well, according to the 5e description on D&D Beyond, kobolds typically have an intelligence of 8, with a -1 deficiency, and a wisdom of 7 with a -2 deficiency. So they're far from intelligent humanoids, though clever and crafty in their own ways. But we'll address intelligence in a later chapter. As a side note, there's a whole storyline in Forgotten Realms and Baldur's Gate lore that's related to Nashkill mines and the kobolds mining cobalt, the element. I think it's a nice little Easter egg that ties their German folklore origins to the Forgotten Realms. Throughout the game, you'll notice that Astarion has multiple references to kobolds. Example 1. When speaking with Gwendoly, the Gur hunter in the swamps, Astarion makes a joke about the Gur hunting a kobold. Depending on your narrative branch, the timing when you meet the Gur, and if you know Astarion is a vampire, this dialogue does have some minor variations.
Something terrifying, no doubt. Dragon? Cyclops? Kobold?
Example number 2. If you meet the Gur without Astarion, there's a unique, exclusive exchange in which you can tell him that Gwendoly was a kobold.
What? Who? What happened? Why? Because Cazador sent him. Why else? Tell me about this hunter. He obviously wasn't a vampire. Was he dragonborn? An orc? Something ferocious, surely. A kobold? A kobold? I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. Cazador always had a twisted sense of humor.
Example 3. When you have the bite scene, depending on if you found the boar he snacked on or not, there are 2 different variations of him listing the types of creatures that he devours. Each time, kobolds is one of them. Pay close attention to the way he says kobolds. It's very telling.
I've never killed anyone. Well, not for food. I feed on animals. Boars. Deer. Kobolds. Whatever I can get.
And finally, as a general note to add, when you tell Astarion that he can't eat others, he does have some choice thoughts on what constitutes a thinking and non-thinking creature, and what constitutes a human versus an animal. All of these will vary based on the narrative branches that you select and what your TAV's custom creation is.
What? Look, I swear I won't come after yours. But anyone's? They're just as dead. What? Oh, you're joking. Although, what do you consider an animal? I mean, elves and humans are obviously out, but the goblins, kobolds, gnomes? In that case, I'll restrict myself to animals and only the dullest goblins.
So, how is it that Astarion is even eating a kobold, like he implies in the bite scene? They are humanoids, after all. And as we know Cazador's rules...
First, thou shalt not drink the blood of thinking creatures.
And after we're bitten, Astarion expresses to us that we were his first.
I've had this condition for 2 centuries, but truth be told, you were my first.
So, do kobolds fall into non-thinking creatures? Or did Astarion experiment a little before he tasted us? Was our favorite elf acting in quiet rebellion? The spawn versus master bond gives the master control over their spawn, but it's not like they're lifeless meat sacks when they're not actively following a command. They do, to an extent, have some free will. That's how Cazador was able to visit an old friend and then later attack Belioth. So, could the sewer kobolds be Astarion's defiance of free will? So, are kobolds thinking creatures? I'm going to be straight to the point. Yes. However, that is exactly why I theorize Astarion is obsessed with them. And that's where the Forgotten Realms and Baldur's Gate 3 lore is going to come deepest into play. Kobolds, though humanoid, are often seen as fiends, monsters, or slave-class animals. Despite the fact that they're humanoids, that they can think, and that they are not actually slaves, they're often treated with the same level of respect as any of the things mentioned above. There's a reason that you see dead kobolds in the sewers, you see them stealing items to sell to player characters, and why you even see one being snacked on by the giant eagle at Lathander's temple. They're expendable and easily forgotten. Given Cazador's station and his lust for power, to him, a kobold would be considered at the level of an animal. Now, I'm not saying that Cazador gave Astarion permission to eat a kobold. Far from it, actually. Cazador clearly only expects his spawn to eat what he gives them, the dead, disgusting rats. However, the way the spawn and master relationship works isn't directly black and white directions. For example, Cazador told Astarion and his spawn to seduce victims and bring them back to his palace. He didn't specifically pick the victims, with the exception of the Gur children, and there were favored spawn who were favored because of the higher numbers and given time frames that they were able to seduce, which implies that failure was an option. Astarion also mentions in his confession scene that at first he tried to select only beautiful people, but that after a while, he just stopped caring.
I tried to pick beautiful people where I could, but there were so many over the years. After a while, you stop caring.
Which implies Cazador's orders were not cut and dry. Astarion had some agency in who he would seduce and how he would attempt to seduce them. The act of going out and attempting was enough to fulfill the sire's direction in their bond. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had to punish Astarion for failure, which he did punish Astarion for failures. If not for agency, Astarion would have been compelled, for lack of a better term. If Cazador's rules were 100% black and white, cut and dry, perfect, Astarion would be physically incapable of returning without someone who was seduced. So following that train of logic, that's where Cazador's feelings can come into play. Since he's giving the order, what he constitutes as a thinking creature is going to heavily depend on what Cazador himself considers to be a thinking creature. Technically, all creatures in the Forgotten Realms are thinking. Otherwise, animal speech would be the most useless ritual spell ever. So given that context, Cazador must have a hierarchy of what he thinks is and is not thinking, or is and is not valuable. Now, we have no way of knowing for sure if Astarion was actually drinking kobold blood, despite the fact that he said he was in the bite scene. However, if he was, that would explain his obsession with them. Kobolds can think. Their blood would be closer to our blood, so drinking them, despite the fact that they're thinking, would be a true act of rebellion, although it would require Cazador to see them as a non-thinking creature. Now, do I personally think he was actually drinking them? No, I don't. As we all know, I am obsessed with vampires. And one thing nearly every single solitary vampire lore has in common is that a new or baby vampire is more likely to lose control or have a hard time stopping the first time they drink the blood of a humanoid. Astarion has that exact issue in our bite scene. And like we said, he does confess that we were his first. Personally, I theorize that Astarion is obsessed with kobolds because he loves the idea of the rebellion of eating one. He likes what they represent, and to an extent, Cazador is aware of that. Remember that unique exchange?
A kobold? A kobold? I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. Cazador always had a twisted sense of humor.
That's why Astarion feels that Cazador would send a kobold after him as a way to just f*** with him. Before we go, let us know. Do you think Astarion ate kobolds? Or do you think he just wished he could? Writing and gaming, they're my passions. And with subscribers like you, I get to share those passions. So I hope you'll join me next week for another video essay. And good night, darlings.
And now you're all mine. And I'm all yours. Until morning, at least.